Australia is one of several countries to suspend its funding of the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, following allegations some of its staff members were involved in the October 7 attacks. The developments prompted concerns within the international community as to how to continue to provide aid in Gaza.
The news has sent shockwaves across the region and through the international aid community, the biggest relief organisation in Gaza, to lose funding for now at least from its biggest donors, Britain included. Veteran aid workers in the Middle East say it's unacceptable.
Don't undermine the organisation that is the vital lifeline for all of Gaza. None of us other organisations have any capacity to substitute them. Come to your senses, continue aid to UNRWA.
Fleeing Israeli forces in the background, another exodus of Palestinians on the move south in Gaza over the weekend. Among them, deep shock too about the news.
That will be a big disaster for everyone in Gaza. Without support from the international community, we won't be able to survive.
What have the civilians done to deserve this? What have the children, babies and elderly people done to be penalised this way?
UNRWA has provided aid, shelter and education to refugees from Israel's wars with Palestinians since 1949. But Israeli intelligence agencies are believed to have told the agency they believe a dozen of its workers were in some way involved, it's not clear how, with the atrocities of October the 7th, in which 1,200 Israelis were killed. Of the 12 people implicated, the UN Secretary-General says in a statement over the weekend, 9 were immediately identified and terminated by the Commissioner-General of UNRWA, Philippe Lazzarini. 1 is confirmed dead, and the identity of the 2 others is being clarified. The Palestinian Prime Minister accused Britain and others cutting off the UN Relief Agency of colluding with Israeli efforts to expel Gazans from Gaza.
The suspension of aid is in line with the Israeli plans for the forced evacuation of our people from Gaza into Egypt.
On Friday, the International Court of Justice ruled the situation in Gaza is catastrophic and getting worse, and all parties must act urgently to prevent it deteriorating. The move to suspend funding from UNRWA does not help efforts to meet that binding resolution.
Let's go live now to the Shadow Foreign Minister Simon Birmingham. Thanks for your time. Do you welcome the fact that Australia, along with the UK and others, have paused funding now to this agency known as UNRWA?
Hello, Kieran. It's good to be with you. Yes, I do welcome the fact that Australia has followed other nations in suspending funding to UNRWA. Not $1 of Australian taxpayers' money should be going to activities that could fund or support terrorism, could promote or exacerbate extremism. We must be very careful and cautious to ensure that Australian taxpayers' dollars are supporting genuine humanitarian needs. Now, the Albanese government has questions to answer as to why they ignored warnings from the Australian Jewish community and others that were provided last year about the potential involvement of UNRWA staff in the October 7 terrorist attacks. Why not only did they ignore those warnings, but in fact they increased funding to UNRWA following the receipt of those warnings, rather than looking for absolutely fail-safe mechanisms to provide the humanitarian assistance that, of course, people in Gaza need and deserve for innocent civilians, and that should be provided through institutions and organisations where there is complete confidence that none of that funding will support Hamas, terrorist operations or the promotion of extremist ideology.
The problem is, though, there aren't that many other alternatives. There's the Red Cross, of course, but I know the government is already providing funding there. And Penny Wong did raise issues of transparency and that agency dealing with these individuals when she met with him early this month when she was in the Middle East. So, and you heard the UN Secretary-General also saying that they've sacked 9 of them, that 1 is dead, the other 2 they're seeking to work out who they are. Isn't the UN taking appropriate measures given the concerns around some of these individuals?
Well, concerns about UNRWA have been established and reached beyond just these individuals who are alleged to have been involved in the October 7 attacks. They do go to the way in which UNRWA has operated, particularly in teaching and other activities that have potentially promoted extremist ideology and in doing so exacerbated problems and tensions that lead to the rise of Hamas and led to the October 7 attack. So there are broader issues at play there, and the government needs to be clear as to why they ignored those warnings last year, why they didn't respond to Australia's Jewish community, what assurances and guarantees they sought and have received in relation to increased funding commitments. Issues may have been raised, but what guarantees and assurances did the Australian government get before providing the additional funding, rather than looking at the Red Cross or indeed many other non-government organisations that are doing the difficult task of seeking to provide relief, assistance and humanitarian support to people in Gaza and innocent civilians who do clearly need that and for whom we want to see support get to them rather than go into the hands of Hamas or any other militants.
The International Court of Justice has handed down an interim ruling basically urging Israel to avoid civilian casualties, but falling short of a demand for an immediate ceasefire. Has the International Court of Justice got that balance right with this interim ruling, in your view?
We respect the workings of the ICJ and acknowledge their importance. We think the Albanese government was very slow in terms of response to the South African claim that was made to the ICJ, and that, of course, many other partner nations were faster and clearer in their response about the inappropriateness of parts of South Africa's claims and case that they made, and the Albanese government should have been faster and clearer in terms of Australia's response. As for the ICJ's interim findings, they are ones, as I say, we respect the processes. We still strongly believe in Israel's inherent right to self-defence, which, as I understand, was also recognised inherently in the ICJ ruling. But of course, Israel needs to act with regard to innocent civilian lives. It needs to remove Hamas from a position of power, influence and terrorist threat to Israel, but also from a position where Hamas uses Palestinians in Gaza as human shields and places them in greater danger and jeopardy as a result of the way in which they operate and act.
We've only got 30 seconds left, but Peter Malinauskas, your South Australian Premier, says most South Australians will be better off under the government's new tax plan. This, despite it being a broken promise, he says most South Australians will benefit. Politically, does it end up being a winner for Labor, despite the breach of the promise?
I think Australians can see the treachery, trickery and timidity in Anthony Albanese's actions. Treachery in breaking the promise, trickery in the fact that this is just a reshuffle of tax, but in the medium term, it's a grab for $28 billion of more tax, and timidity in that it abandons any sense of reform that eliminated bracket creep and actually embeds bracket creep in the system for the future. Australians are feeling a cost of living crisis far greater than Anthony Albanese's trickery and reshuffling of these tax cuts. Ultimately, he needs to look seriously at how he helps to stop the cost of living crisis, to ease inflation and to ensure that Australians aren't paying more for their electricity and every other household bill.
Simon Birmingham, thanks. We'll talk to you soon.